All right. Now it's recording.
All
um,
right.
Perfect. All right. So I'm just going to start with some general questions. So can you tell me about your role and a little bit about your day-to-day activities? The reason we put what are you actually doing is because we all know what your title is, but what are you actually
hmm
responsible for and kind of focused on in a regular way?
Sure. Well, I'm the ISO, Information Security Officer for Midland Memorial. I'm the first ISO this organization has had. So I came into an organization with no security program at all. They do have a fairly robust privacy compliance program with a compliance director and privacy officer, but really nothing kind of directed to the cyber security side. Um,
Wow.
as a result, I report to the Chief Information Officer.
Mm-hmm.
The compliance director reports to the CEO of the hospital. But I do have a clear, very good dotted line, if you will, to also that group or the executive group. So I enjoy a lot of good support about any endeavors or ideas that I come up with. So day-to-day activities, it's kind of a mix. I've initially spent a lot of time writing policy,
Yeah,
getting
at first it was setting up the program, right? So
setting up the program, writing policy, getting a idea of kind of where we're at.
Mhm.
There was no real surprise. I mean, I think there was some surprise on my part, but no real surprise that hey, they really need to to have a compliant, to have an officer like myself or someone that's dedicated solely to security. And just, I mean, in a general sense, also that's obviously kind of directed to. They could have farmed that out probably to the compliance director, and she probably could have done both roles. But I think they saw the need to have a separate guy that just focuses on nothing but um, cybersecurity, so to speak. So coming into this organization, there's not a long or robust history of IT governance, so there's a lot of room for improvement. Let's just leave it at that. I kind of divided my day, still write policy, review policy. We have a robust policy management system that's very strictly governed. So policy is taken real seriously here. It's not a piece of paper that goes in a book, is what I'm trying to get at. All policy goes through a lot of review process and authorization and then approval. And then it has to be reviewed, strictly reviewed every so often. So I still spend a lot of time looking at policies and making sure they're still up to snuff and doing what we want to do. There's still a lot of areas we really lack in some basic blocking and tackling, I would say, areas, but it's more of a continuous improvement objective. Uh, the goal is not to make it all perfect by either typically throwing money at it, whether it's some kind of software resources. It's just not going to work that way. We all know we're just trying to make it better, show a continuous level of improvement, um, and keep moving forward. Um, and which is, I really appreciate that attitude with the executive staff. Um, it kind of takes a lot of burden off of me. I think I would assume in some organizations there's that, oh, I want to fix it, get everything fixed in a short amount of time, and it'll be perfect, right? Nothing's going to go wrong. We all know that doesn't really work that way.
It's very
So,
not doesn't allow
I'm
for
so,
any risk at all.
right.
Yeah.
So after about 6 months, 8 months in, I've acquired a gentleman, which I took out of the IT department. He's my analyst, security analyst. We have gotten to purchase some tools, and ISAM was the very first thing we purchased. So my goal coming in and my commitment was to go after low-hanging fruit and not spend money needlessly. In other words, be very wise in being a stewardship of the hospital's resources. And the first thing we bought was ISAM. And you might ask why, right? I think I'm kind of getting into the second question a little bit. But let me just go back to those daily activities. I still spend a lot of time looking at some dashboards. Are not really compliance related. They're more pretty heavy-duty security tools dashboard that we've acquired since then. Haven't had them very long, but we do look at a lot of user analytics. I'll just say that. What are people doing on the network? We're trying to spot some behavior that we want to get ahead of. Whether it's an event that's turning into an incident, hopefully we're going to catch things before they turn out to be a really bad incidents, right? Interfacing with my brothers down in the rest of the IT community, it's been a little bit of an uphill battle. I've always read about these situations where a security guy comes in and seems to generate a lot of animosity, and it's true. It's kind of happened to me. I was expecting a very collegiate environment where we're all going to get along because we're all obviously trying to go for the same goal, right, to be secure. But just not always looked at that way. So it's been a lot of working with other people that may not see my role as all that necessary even. And then, of course, we are more or less competing for scarce resources as well.
Right.
Going back to the culture of the organization, when you don't really have a culture of a lot of IT governance or good practices, just about anything I suggest is like, why are we? Oh no, we can't do that. And it's a very basic level. So. It's been a kind of an uphill battle.
I spend a lot of time working with engineers, and my overall takeaway is that change is bad, particularly when it involves a process that they're used to.
Exactly. And there's a whole lot of that. I just don't want to be bothered, right? Security. Obviously, if you're staying in that triad of availability and integrity and the CIA, if you will, right? It's not ever going to be, can be totally unusable, right? It'd be very secure but unusable. But obviously there's always an element of things being not as convenient, and I run into that a lot, especially with the medical staff, to be honest with you. And I've since read, this is my first gig in the healthcare field, so I'm coming in with a lot of probably misconceptions even, or didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I do security, but and I found that a lot of things have been, if it gets in the way of healthcare, this continuity of care, or it slows the doctor down, they don't want to do it. They don't have anything to do with it. And that they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. To use that analogy, in a very, very real sense, and it's just not right. But that's kind of been the culture, if you would. I think that's true in a lot of places. I don't know. I think it's been true. So when I'm faced with like, okay,
yeah. I mean, I say you're in a function where they're not making software, right? So their primary function is a completely different function than what it is that you're doing for them, and it's such an afterthought to them that their primary job is making people better. And again, you're right. You're exactly right. If you stand in the way in any way, and it's been an uphill battle for all sorts of regulatory compliance. I mean, we found it in the compliance field in general that you're seen as obstructionist to good patient care. And slowly educating people that good patient care also involves them being able to trust you with their data, to be sure that nobody's going to steal the credit card that they pay for their health care with. Those things are important to our customers, almost as equally as important as their health. And when we talk to skilled nursing, they understand that reputational piece very, very clearly. But in the hospital setting, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between, that this can vary. Your board understands the reputational impact, and they understand what a breach means, but the doctors just couldn't care any less. And I fully hear you, but it is like back and forth, and healthcare is its own very strange little animal.
Yeah. It's a surprise. I came from the utility industry. And the utility industry, and a segment of utility, especially transmission, electrical transmission, is highly regulated.
Extremely.
And there's a lot of security around it, and there's a lot of better security around a transmission control center than around an EMR.
Right.
Just hands down, hands down. So I was kind of surprised, that people do not really realize that you're dealing with a stick of dynamite when they're accessing a record, or we got to print that thing. Well, our workflow is they got to print all this information, and they don't look at it as that's potentially catastrophic. They just don't see it that way. That they need to be highly focused on what they're doing with that information. Say it that way. So, kind of, how did I handle compliance activities prior to ComplyTrack? I didn't.
Yeah.
I had a lot of questions and I had a lot of things, but I failed to really be able to organize those really well. So when I was shown ComplyTrack, I just saw it as well, why wouldn't you use ComplyTrack or a system that can organize an assessment? Now, I could come up with all kinds of questions, and I can interpret objectives and controls and then apply them, and we're kind of doing that. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm kind of doing that in a kind of one-off now, but it was very daunting. How am I going to do a security rule assessment? How am I really going to do that against this asset? So seeing ComplyTrack was very, very enlightening to me. It appealed, and it just brought so much value to the table. So what problems or determinations? It was really trying to organize something. I can't imagine when I was going through ComplyTrack implementation services that we consumed. I would ask Wendy and the other lady on the phone. I say, well,
Deanna.
How do other people do this? And there was never a clear-cut answer. Well, someone do this, or someone that's have elaborate spreadsheets that they try to manage. And I just say, why would you want to do it that way? So it was pretty obvious, since I didn't have a whole lot of investment in creating some elaborate homegrown system or trying to pour through objectives and standards and come up with my own methodology. It was just pretty much that brought a lot of value to the table. Why would I want to go do all that, reinvent the wheel, so to speak?
Right.
And of course, we're focusing using the HITRUST. We already had, my boss already had a very favorable view of HITRUST in the common security controls.
Right.
That there was no uphill battle on selling that as far as doing a HIPAA security assessment or using those as the standard.
Right.
Plus, and I can't emphasize this enough, when I go to a person, maybe another manager, and I'm either asking them questions or they're looking at the ISAM dashboard. I've done it every which way you can imagine. I've interviewed them, more or less answered the questions for them, give me the evidence that I'm going to plug it in here, or I've just used the workflow and said, here, you're going to get some questions, and then you'll need to answer them. I've done it all the way down to the lowest common denominator. I kind of speak about that here in a minute, maybe. But regardless, people will think that you are just being a jerk when you start talking objectives or security objectives. And I don't have to. I don't have to convince them. This is not my opinion. This is a standard that I am presenting to you, an objective that we're trying to meet. I don't have to sell them on the idea. So it comes with a ton of credibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's
that
a
makes
really
perfect.
I hadn't thought about that. I mean, as part of your, it sounds like part of your, a major part of your challenge is educating your customers, like your internal clientele, on the need for this, right? Why is it important?
Yes.
And the fact that this tool allows you to provide that sort of upfront and squash any kind of why do I care discussion immediately is interesting. I mean, I never thought about the value of it from that perspective.
I think a lot depends on if the organization has gone through a real incident or if they've ever had a breach they had to report. We have not had a breach that we've reported. We just had, I'm sorry, that sounded bad. We haven't had any breaches, period.
Not
So
any
a breach that we hadn't reported. Yeah, that sounds bad. No, that doesn't say we may not have one tomorrow. I'm just saying today. So well, OCR is going to come and investigate us. Well, that's that's your chicken little. You're just trying to scare us, which may be very true and completely on point, but is it perceived that way, right? And you're right. It's a lot of training and getting that culture aligned with what we really need to do to pass, an OCR audit or a desk audit, or we have an investigation. We got to show that we're doing what we're doing, and we're trying hard, and we're making progress. That's what we're trying to show, right? I've used the ISAM as again, pretty much as designed. Pick out the objectives, get all the roles, defined and assigned to objectives, and just kick it off. Publish the stupid thing, and there we go. And then of course train all the people. Okay, you're going to get this, and it's how you're going to do it. And we've gone through all that. Pushed it all the way down to when I say the lowest common denominator, I'm talking the server analyst that's sitting in a cubicle farm that probably doesn't have any idea or care really what I'm all about. He's just doing his job as a server analyst. He gets those questions. I get the best answers from those folks because they're going to tell me the truth, to be honest with you.
That's
I've also done it. They just say, oh, yeah, well, we don't do that. Okay. Now, it's a little bit tedious if they say yes. You say they answer the affirmative. Well, I need evidence. Show me. Then I get the big sigh, roll their eyes. They don't want to fork over the evidence because that takes a little effort. But they'll answer the questions all day long. But I'll get good answers. No, we don't really do that. Well, yeah, we say we do, but no, here's why we really can't say you do that. When it comes to getting deep under the hood about, well, how does that group policy really affect what we're talking about, whatever topic we're talking about, right? Yeah. Or an application analyst when you're talking about the actual application. We have kind of two distinct groups here. We have, of course, CIS, the informatics folks, and then we have an applications group that are taking care of apps, and then we have a server analyst type, infrastructure type folks. So those are the three people that I work with. I've also farmed out the questions only to the directors or managers of those distinct three areas. And I got a mixed bag. Obviously, a manager or director probably is a little savvy and is now coloring their answers because they know they may look bad.
Well, and they may not have no clarity on the actual process either. They may be answering to the best of their ability, which may not be the actual process that gets used, or what we around here call the workaround. We have a very specific thing that we call it.
True.
And you can never uncover without talking to the people who are doing the work. So
that's true.
It's
I think
really
I think you're being charitable in some regard, because I found that they were gaming the system. I've caught people just basically gaming the system a little bit. I say a little bit, but and that's having a foot in both areas. Some technical expertise, and not that I'm the catch me out or the end all as far as technical knowledge, but it's not foreign to me, so I kind of know when my legs being pulled a little bit.
Right.
Then from a management point of view, really, no, we don't really do that. Oh yeah, we have a complete list of all of our assets. Yeah, well, show me. Well, it may take some time to get that, which that probably means, no, you really don't have it. But again, I'm just going to say it's helped keep everybody, the formality of it, and keep everybody on even keel. It works very well.
That's great. So, I mean, just to provide some structure to the process, I would imagine is useful.
Structure, yes, that's a great word. I use the word formality because it's not like I'm just winging it.
Not making this up.
Yeah, I mean you're just making all this up. No, I'm not. And this is why. And I can always report back directly to objectives and our scorecard. So I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to massage the data so I can show it to an executive who will not care what the objective says. They just want to know, well, how are we doing? And I can report. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that can report up adequately, but also I can use the detail to communicate either laterally or down as necessary.
Yep.
We've conducted about 5 assessments. I've done one just OCR audit protocol objective on an affiliate organization. Well, I will say it was easy because it was like no. But then again, even though we had an organization, again, we're affiliated with, and we kind of knew that it was, well, we got a lot of work to do over here, actually going through the motions, it solidified or codified, if you will, this is what we got to do. These are the risk areas we have. So even when you know that you're going to have a lot of issues, it's worth going through it. So that was the OCR protocol.
And this is for business associates? Did they fall under BAA, or are they actual part of it?
Well, we're in Texas. Texas is kind of weird. We can't hire physicians directly. If you knew that, a hospital cannot hire a physician directly.
Yep. Yeah.
So when I say affiliate, we call them 501As, which is more of a designation that means that we're kind of govern them, but it's an association of doctors, and they govern themselves. But the hospital has a lot of interest in, obviously, but they have to be very arm's length because we can't be seen to be inducing physicians to refer to the hospital. That's against the law. Right.
So, you guys,
Yeah.
Interesting.
We call them.
Got the Texas had its own interesting.
Yeah. So we just call them 501As just as a shortcut. But it's a cardiac group of physicians. So anyway, we kind of knew that they're small. They didn't, and then they're not going to have a lot of staff, and they don't have a lot of organization, but they still have to abide by the rules, right? So we went through the process. We've done just pure asset, controls evaluations or control assessments on our EMR for meaningful use. This last one I did, I'm using it. We have a known, or we have perceived or learned of a risk, and so I'm going back to ISAM, and I look at the Common Security Framework objectives, and basically cherry-picked what questions, and this is all around, when I talked about inventory earlier, made that little quip about inventory, kind of what we're focusing on, 501As and their inventory of of machines? Do they have good control of their machines? We perceive a risk, so I'm going back more like almost like a domain assessment, but I'm focusing on one thing. So I'm picking out anything that would have to do with an asset, media, control of it, disposal of it. You know, picked up probably about 9 objectives, and running more or less an assessment, but using probably not a true assessment in the sense of the ISAM framework, but more of it now is providing me with a guide when I'm walking through this organization and learning about their deficiencies when it comes to these areas.
Interesting. We have in healthcare who are in compliance who use our traditional risk assessment manager in this very similar way, and they call them custom assessments, right? It's like not against any particular thing that they're going to get audited against, but like you said, they're doing a custom assessment to define risk mitigation strategies against a specific identified risk. So it's interesting that you found the same use in ISAM and are using it in the same way. I find that very fascinating. Do you feel like you could use the tool, when you use it that way, do you tend to just cherry pick question sets and put together your own? I mean, do you just print it out, or do you run it through the system again?
I cherry pick it.
Mm-hmm.
I pick the control objectives that I want out of the universe of control objectives. So I'm focusing. I use the information because I can look at the whole compendium of control topics and just pick out what I want, if you will. And sometimes that makes sense. Just like many assessments, using a tool, you get a fair amount of, I don't know how, I'd like to, one of these days I'll try to figure out what percentage of not applicable am I going to generate, right? And so I'm just trying to keep a lot of the not applicable down and get it custom, like you said, customize it or narrow it down to a topic. And then usually this is driven by, we have seen something that we want to focus on to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
An emergent issue. How's that?
Nice.
I haven't had to prepare anything for auditors per se, for auditors coming in. I will say that when I got here, I was I'm sorry?
If you're doing phase 2 HIPAA prep, you haven't had to respond yet, but you're prepping in case that happens, right? So.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I was handed, when I got here, a 2013 risk assessment, security rule risk assessment. And it was, I don't know what they spent. I really don't want to know. It's probably, I would assume, a good deal of money. And it was basically a spreadsheet, of here's the reg, and this is where it was almost like flying over this is my first, they're handing this to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at, okay, so what have we really fixed on this security assessment? I came in 14. This was done long before I got there, about a year maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Not much has been accomplished, right? It's like, oh, but it was a lot like someone flying over the jungle, looking down, going, oh, look, trees, because that's kind of what the assessment was. And at first I thought, well, this is normal. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's normal. This is one way to do it. And granted, it's a target-rich environment, if you know what I mean. So they didn't have to get very granular to expose some weaknesses that should be corrected. So it didn't have to go. It could go on pages after page after page. Didn't really have to. So when I say it's like flying over the jungle and saying, oh, look, trees, that's because that's probably what they needed to see. Now, look, you got the trees being problems. Look, you got problems. You need to address these things. So handed that, it kind of set the stage. I'm like, well, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this what I'm supposed to present?
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly realized, well, no, because well, why? Well, management hadn't done anything about it.
Yeah.
You can say dig a canal because I need to get from one ocean to another. Well, that's easier said than done. So, you know, guys can blow in, and you always need you do need periodically an outside set of eyes to come in, look at your program, and you need that. I'm not saying you don't, but a lot of times those guys come in and they say, well, yeah, you need to do this. Well, that's like that's a huge project, or that's a big undertaking, or here it's like, oh, how do we do that? Oh my
Mm.
gosh. Some topics are fairly large. I want to elaborate because I can't, and I wouldn't anyway. I couldn't print it. Some of the issues we have here are just, they're big. I mean, they're not big as far as, OMG, oh, look at this massive problem. But as far as like extricating, how do we get the organization away from doing this? It's a lot
So
to
it
it.
requires a multi-level solution. It's not an easy solution, not an easy
Right.
problem to solve, perhaps.
Right. And so when, I don't know, when our organization is faced with horribly large problems, it does generate a bit of, well, we just kind of take root, don't want to move, don't know what to do, don't know where to start. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that, eat an elephant by taking one bite at a time kind of, all we see is like, oh, this is going to be so hard to do. And, getting a couple thousand people moving in the same direction, and 150, I don't know, we have like 100 something different departments. It's just,
Wow.
it's just the communication uh, problem is probably my biggest headache. How do I effectively communicate with people? But I can communicate effectively up, like I alluded to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So, because they want to see the big picture. How are we doing? Well, we're not doing so good. That's where we got to work on. Oh, okay. Well, then that gives me the impetus and the credibility I need and the authority to go to sally forth and try to fix the problem. Um, do I have a favorite function? I don't know if I do have a favorite function. I take ISAM for what it is. Um, I guess I have a fairly long, I won't say illustrious, but just a career in IT and working with users. I like to be a really good user because I know what it's like to be on the other side where there's a lot of carping or a lot of, I wish you would do this. I just like to take the tool that I have presented to me and just use it to the best of my ability. I don't spend a lot of time wishing it was do this or that. I had made one or two suggestions that have been pretty much fulfilled, so very happy about that.
Gotta love that.
Yeah.
I love to hear that. Yeah, no, I mean, it's like we in product marketing really like to hear that. But the flip side of that, I mean that's the bonus of having software as a service, right? Is that you can ask for things and they get put in the queue and eventually they get done. And if you're smart and you ask for smart things that we should have done all along, then they'll get in the queue faster and get done faster. So
Exactly.
it is the bonus of software as a service. I mean, is that kind of what your favorite piece about it is that you've got that flexibility, you know it's going to be updated? I mean, to me, that sounds like what you're aiming at.
Yeah, that's probably exactly. I don't have to think of everything myself. I don't want to try to reinvent. The 90% of, well, 100% of what it's supposed to do is doing.
Great.
Some of it's window dressing, and I just don't bother worrying about the window dressing. I just don't. That's just me. Maybe because I hated. I was always, not that I was a software developer, but I've always been on the other side of the fence where people are, I want to do this, I want to do that, and I do understand. And this is probably the one of the very few times I've kind of violated my own rule. If in previous life I would be more like the CIO, and people come to me this, well, we want to buy this product, and there's always a magic bullet element to it, right?
Mm.
They think, well, I've got this huge workflow, it's maybe a workflow problem or other kind of issue, but this software is going to fix all of it. It's
Right.
not. That's not what but that's what they think, right? And I've made more than a few user groups do it the hard way, maybe with a spreadsheet or in a, in a, in a in a way that they would make them think through the process. Then they built it basically by hand or doing it the hard way. Then when they wanted to come to the table, because they know it works, now they want to make it more efficient. Because most of the time they're bringing they don't know what's going to work, but this software is going to make it work. So they don't really have that fundamental idea of what. Probably I violate my own rule with ISAM. I will just say that. Because I knew I was not going to be doing this, manually, if you will, or by hand. And saw what it offered. I was just like, okay. So I will take a little hubris there with that.
But what it replaces is such an insanely manual process, and then the whole thought process of trying to come up with filtering through all of those frameworks and coming up with all of those control sets yourself, it would take forever.
Yeah.
Or to Franken control all the controls together. I think it's just,
really?
It's so obvious, like, oh, you've done that work already. Oh, okay. So it's an efficiency question.
Exactly.
Having that wheel seems a little silly.
So what would you do to manage to turn off your access to ComplyTrack? So, okay, so you knew I was introduced to ISAM via ComplyTrack, more or less.
Right.
Because of my coworkers across the hall, right across the hall, I'm up here with the compliance guys.
Uh-huh.
The director and privacy officer for the 501As right down the hall. So we did a lot of interaction, and they were using ComplyTrack.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what started it all. Well, they have this, and I was called. I guess Kelly Price called on me.
Yep.
And there was a lot of built-in credibility because these guys do ComplyTrack. They're completely happy with ComplyTrack on that side of the hall. It certainly helped me, if you will, vet ISAM. Right. Being from reputable source, I was probably the only guy involved in the buying process, especially as far as evaluating and then deciding this is what I want. Even though I had to take it to a committee, had to get my boss to sponsor me, take it to a capital committee, and there's some little hoops you got to jump through. But it wasn't hard to sell. I'll be honest with you there, and I think you were the only vendor looked at.
My favorite situation. Love hearing that.
I didn't have to go far. I tell you what I did though. I did take a brief look at. Well, okay, if ISAM is going to be, all about high trust, well, let me just go straight to high trust.
Yeah, look at the CSF over there, which makes sense.
And I did.
I can tell you
but I quickly overruled it. I was like, nah. But don't get me wrong, I like high trust, and I like the concept of what they're promoting a lot.
Yeah.
But as far as what I needed to do, not really. No, ma'am.
Yeah.
Not really the same thing. They have a different agenda.
Their agenda is to become a certification center more than it is to solve your problem, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And which is fine. You got to have those people promulgating those standards that people will agree on. Is yes, that is a standard we can shoot for, and it will mean something. That's necessary. But as far as what I need, you just said it. What I needed in a tool, they really didn't have. They couldn't offer that. That I thought. So I don't use ComplyTrack now a lot. I do need to use it more. I need a to me, ComplyTrack is a documentation system. I need to document more. That's probably my biggest weakness, is documenting some day-to-day things that occur, not incidents per se, but as we come across things, and to show that narrative, if you will. This is where we're at. This is how we're progressing. I'm convinced that if you have the right narrative, I don't say a good one, or implying that this is if you can spin a good yarn, but if you can document your progression and then, like we are moving forward, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I get really down the dumps sometimes because I'm like, oh my God, we're not doing anything. We're just, yeah, I take it hard sometimes, probably too hard. Dad, I wish we were further. Why can't we get this done? Go pull my hair out, run down the hall, get upset. But I think if I documented better, I could go back and say, yes, we've made progress. Look at where we were a year ago. And I'm probably my biggest enemy, worst enemy with that in that regard.
Tracking trends over time, I mean, it's huge, and then and that definitely it goes a long way to showing the progress of your program over time. And I do think, I mean, I don't know, I'm like you, right? You get wrapped up in what you're doing, and you stay focused on the goals that you've not yet achieved because that's where your primary focus has to be. But to me, it's like once I'm finished with something, I let it go. It doesn't even show up on my mental radar anymore, so I lose track of the stuff finished well before I lose track of the stuff that's still on the to-do list. So you're probably right in that you're making more progress than you think you are simply by being in the role and paying attention to it. I'm sure there's more progress happening than you would expect. But do you have access to Activity and Event Manager? Do they give you access to that, or
yeah,
you just?
I do have access to it. I just don't. I'm not, I guess, disciplined or got it into my routine as well as I should.
It feels like with compliance, because they have to prove out, that's such a huge part of what they do is proving out progress of that program over time. They dashboard in it, right? So they spend an awful lot of time in it, but it is a discipline.
And it needs to be done. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I would hate to be in compliance. It's just like, ugh. I mean, I don't know why I got that. I love those guys over there, but wouldn't want to do their job. Let's put it that way. I like the problem solving.
The hilarity of that being my primary market is that occasionally I show up to like the HCCA trade show, and those guys they all look like they just got hit on the back of the head with a 2x4. I mean, they come up to the booth like, oh my God, do you have anything that can help me? They're just
yeah.
I
hear you.
Describe my typical market, like what my typical buyer would be or my typical user would be, and I was like, look, for my core compliance officer, I'm like, I got a real good mental picture for you. Here it is. Like, picture yourself like a 45-year-old woman, smart, excellent at multitasking, probably very community focused, who basically comes into work and sticks all 5 of of all the fingers on each hand into the holes in the dike and prays. That's basically what she does all day, every day.
Yeah.
Like, compliance just feels like a thankless job, and like they're constantly the pile of regulations. I mean, you're onto the same thing. The pile of regulations that the change, the growth, they're consistently faced with. It's more than any one department can take on when faced with an entire hospital system. It's just a lot. And it always underfunded because it's an internal issue, right?
But they have there's obviously a compliance aspect to the role I have.
Yeah.
And I need to learn from those folks. And I probably need to relearn that lesson and become a little more disciplined in documenting. I mean, if someone came in cold turkey, especially some Monday morning when I'm a little bit groggy, dragging in from a weekend, going, okay, describe your progress. I'll probably just go, I don't know, and I don't know. Yeah, I just like, and I would probably avail myself. I would do better documentation. But anyway, is that pretty much cover what you wanted to know about
Totally.
how?
That we
Okay,
want.
good.
Brilliant.
And you're gonna
So you,
make me sound. You're gonna make me sound like a genius, right? I just gonna be like, wordsmith this thing, and
that's why I have Stephen over
Well, and as Mary said, if you get full review approval, it will be. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, make me look good. So.
We always, you're making us look good, so we'll have to return the favor, that's for sure. So this was great.
Okay.
If we run into any specific questions or anything that we come down to, I mean, the quantification piece of it, I don't think you can really quantify time saved or efficiencies because you built the program from the ground up, but that's a really interesting perspective. We find that we're, there's a lot of our customers that are in the same position. But either just starting a program, improving a program, or coming into that level of depth of program where it's been like a multi-tasked compliance individual handling it and they have to spin it out. So I think it's a great story to tell, and I really appreciate your time today.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
thank
good.
you so much.
All right. Well, if you have any follow-on questions, just let me know. I'll be available.
Will do.
Thank you.
All right, give us a couple of weeks and we'll get you draft.
Okay. All righty.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thanks, Mary.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.